The Secret Contacts. Zionism and Nazi Germany. 1933 to 1941. Klaus Poken. Introduction. Why? This is 2026 and no one is able to explain Germany's love for the Zionists and American lustful devotion for Zionism, to the extremum of creating a new religion called Christian Zionism, with President Joe Biden as one of its publicly announced disciples. I came across a fantastic, astutely researched, short and credible explanation of the love affair of Nazi Germany with the then new kids on the block called the Zionists. I do not have much to offer on this matter, except my ability to republish the detailed research in a more accessible fashion. I can no longer sit on the side and watch the brutal German police maul the pro-Palestinian demonstrators like wild vicious dogs, with immense hate and absolute shameless immunity. Dara Osheda, Chief of Software. Computational Class Notes. April 21, 2026. Republic of Ireland. Anti-Semitism became official German government policy when Hitler was named Chancellor of the German Reich on January 30, 1933. The spring of 1933 also witnessed the beginning of a period of private cooperation between Zionism and the German fascist regime to increase the inflow of German Jewish immigrants and capital to Palestine. The Zionist authorities succeeded in keeping this cooperation a secret for a long period, and only since the beginning of the 1960s have criticisms of it been expressed here and there. The Zionist reaction has usually consisted of declarations that their one-time contacts with Nazi Germany were undertaken solely to save the lives of Jews. But the contacts were all the more remarkable because they took place at a time when many Jews and Jewish organizations demanded a boycott of Nazi Germany.
On the occasion of the 16th Convention of the Israeli Communist Party, a paper was submitted at the outset of the conference in which it was slated that after Hitler's taking of power in Germany, when all anti-fascist in the world and the great majority of the Jewish organizations proclaimed a boycott against Nazi Germany, contacts and collaboration existed between Zionist leaders and the Hitlerite government. The paper quoted the Zionist official Eliezer Livna, who had been editor of the Haganah organ during the Second World War, as declaring, during a symposium organized by the Israeli newspaper Maariv in 1966, that for the Zionist leadership the rescue of Jews was not an aim in itself, but only a means, i.e., to establishing a Jewish state in Palestine.
Identity: anti-Zionist German Jews. To the Zionist leaders, Hitler's assumption of power held out the possibility for the flow of immigrants to Palestine. Previously, the majority of German Jews, who identified themselves as Germans, had little sympathy with Zionist endeavors. German Statistic, compiled prior to the assumption of power by the fascists, classified the Jewish minority only under the heading religious faith, and it was left to the fascist legislators to introduce the concept race as a characteristic and thereby include even the long-assimilated descendants of members of the Jewish community as Jews. According to the statistics, there lived in Germany in 1933 503,000 Jews, constituting 0.76% of the total population. 31% of all German Jews lived in the capital, Berlin, where they made up 4.3% of the city's population. German statistics also indicate that the population of the Jews in Germany decreased in the years between 1871 and 1933 from 1.05% to 0.76%. These German Jews were overwhelmingly non- or anti-Zionist, and prior to 1937, the Zionist Union for Germany, Zionistische Vereinigung für Deutschland, henceforth ZVFD, experienced great difficulty in gaining a hearing. Amongst the Jews of Germany counted in the year 1925, there were, for example, only 8,739 persons, not even 2%, eligible to vote in the Zionist conventions, that is, as members of Zionist organization. At the regional elections of the Jewish community in Prussia that were held in February 1925, only 26 members out of 124 elected belonged to Zionist groups. A report by the Karen Haysad submitted to the 24th session of the ZVFD in July 1932 said, "In the course of evaluating the Karen Haysad work in Germany, it should never be forgotten that we in Germany have to reckon not only with the indifference of extensive Jewish circles but also with their hostility. rejection of Zionism. Corresponding to this fundamental position, the CV also declared its sharp rejection of Zionism. Thus a resolution passed by the Main Council of the CV on April 10, 1921, concluded with the words, "If the work for settlement in Palestine were nothing more than a task of aid and assistance, then from the point of view of the Centralvarian nothing would be said against the promotion of this work." However, the settlement in Palestine is in the first place an object of national Jewish policy and hence its promotion and support should be rejected. Consequently, it was the CV above all which, in the years prior to Hitler's assumption of power, stood in the forefront of the progressive parties and organizations in their fight against antisemitism. Regarding this attitude, the Jewish author Wiener E. Moss remarked, "While the leaders of the CV saw it their special duty to represent the interests of the German Jews in the active political struggle, Zionism stood for systematic Jewish non-participation in German public life. It rejected as a matter of principle any participation in the struggle led by the CV." The attitude of the Zionists towards the encroaching menace of fascist domination in Germany was determined by some common ideological assumptions. The fascists as well as the Zionists believed in unscientific racial theories, and both met on the same ground in their beliefs in such mystical generalizations as national character, Volkstum, and race. Both were chauvinistic and inclined towards racial exclusiveness. Thus the Zionist official Gerhard Holdheim wrote in 1930 in an edition of the Süddeutsche Monatsheft, dedicated to the Jewish question, a publication in which, amongst others, leading anti-Semites aired their views. The Zionist program encompasses the conception of homogeneous, indivisible Jewry on a national basis. The criterion for Jewry is hence not a confession of religion, but the all-embracing sense of belonging to a racial community that is bound together by ties of blood and history and which is determined to keep its national individuality. That was the same language, the same phraseology, as the fascists used. No wonder then that the German fascists welcomed the conceptions of the Zionists, with Alfred Rosenberg, the chief ideologue of the Nazi Party, writing, "Zionism must be vigorously supported so that a certain number of German Jews is transported annually to Palestine or at least made to leave the country." With an eye on such statements, Hans Lamm later wrote, "It is indisputable that during the first stages of their Jewish policy, the National Socialists thought it proper to adopt a pro-Zionist attitude.